Welcome to installment 61 of Porter-Pedia, the show dedicated to exploring the expansive, brilliant, and often completely contradictory world, work, and life of Cole Porter. It is great to have you back with us.
Always a pleasure.
Now, for the listener who has been following along with our overarching syllabus here, you know that this specific exploration is the fourth in our ongoing series, examining the absolute labyrinth of cultural references used in Porter's legendary list songs.
It is a format he essentially weaponized.
Absolutely. I mean, we have already dissected the lyrical gymnastics in the songs Farming, and they couldn't compare to You, among others. And if you haven't caught those earlier analyses, I strongly encourage you to pause, go back, and check them out.
Yeah, you really see the evolution of his technique in those earlier pieces.
Exactly. They map out the foundational architecture of how Porter's mind works when he starts aggressively cataloging the world around him. And actually, speaking of cataloging, I have to mention this right at the top.
Oh, the book.
Yes, the book. If you are the kind of listener who loves this type of rigorous, obsessive unpacking, like if you want the complete historical dossier behind every single clever rhyme, you absolutely must buy the book Porter-Pedia.
It's basically the definitive decoder ring for the Porter universe.
It really is. It's an exhaustive, fiercely well-researched guide that explains every single reference Cole Porter ever dropped in his lyrics. We are talking over 2,600 of them.
Yeah, over 2,600. It's crazy.
It's a masterpiece of musical archaeology, honestly, and frankly, we couldn't do this show without it. We've got a link provided in the description, so do yourself a favor and grab a copy.
Highly recommended.
So let's turn the dial to 1955. We're looking at a deeper cut today, a song titled Give Me the Land, which was ultimately slashed from the Broadway musical Silk Stockings before the show ever fully solidified its Broadway run.
Right.
And on its surface, if you just glance at the sheet music, it reads like a jaunty, almost aggressively patriotic jingle. But the moment you start applying any real pressure to the lyrics, the floor gives out.
It completely gives out.
Yeah. And you realize you are standing in the middle of a highly satirical, almost dystopian inventory of post-war America.
Because it isn't just a list. It is a razor-sharp sociological audit.
Yeah.
I mean, Porter is turning his incredibly refined cosmopolitan eye onto his own country at a very specific volatile moment in time.
Right, the mid-50s?
Exactly. He is looking at a nation that is suddenly obsessed with mass consumption, a nation that has industrialized its own identity, and he is capturing it with this winking, deeply ironic affection.
But, you know, to understand the mechanics of this song, we have to understand the specific crucible Porter was operating in during 1955, because the America of 1955 and the Broadway of 1955, for that matter, is vastly different from the Roaring '20s or the depressed '30s, where Porter initially cemented his legacy.
Oh, completely different ecosystem.
Yeah, completely.
Let's start with the immediate framework. So Give Me the Land was written for Silk Stockings, which was a musical adaptation of the classic 1939 film Ninotchka.
Oh, right, the famous Garbo Laughs film.
Right, exactly. The core narrative there revolves around a strict, dogmatic Soviet envoy sent to Paris who is slowly, systematically seduced by the frivolous luxuries of the West.
Romance, champagne, and crucially, a pair of silk stockings.
Yes. Now, in 1939, that was a clever geopolitical romantic comedy. But by 1955, adapting that specific story carried a completely different, massively amplified geopolitical weight.
Well, because the ideological battle lines of the Cold War are firmly entrenched by then.
Exactly.
It's no longer just a theoretical contrast of cultures. It is the defining existential conflict of the era. Capitalism and glamour versus communism and austerity.
Right. And Porter's job, musically, is to make the American side of that equation sound as seductively overwhelming as possible.
The assignment is to write an anthem of Western abundance. But I think the tension comes from who is writing it, because the popular mythology of Cole Porter is like the glittering expatriate, right? The Yale-educated heir sipping cocktails on the Riviera, throwing lavish aristocratic parties in Venetian palazzos.
But by the mid-1950s, that reality is a ghost.
Yeah.
He is no longer the toast of the jazz age. He is a man trapped in a failing body.
The physical reality he was enduring while writing this is just staggering to think about. You mentioned the accident earlier, the horse falling on him in 1937. It wasn't just a one-time trauma.
No, it was a decades-long deterioration.
Right. He was constantly dealing with bone infections, amputations of dead bone tissue, and a level of daily grinding pain that would have broken almost anyone else's mind.
And then, in 1954, just as he is deep in the weeds of developing Silk Stockings, his wife Linda dies.
Oh, that's right.
And Linda wasn't just his spouse, She was his social architect, his fiercest protector, and his primary source of emotional grounding. Her death leaves him fundamentally unmoored.
And while all of this catastrophic personal tragedy is unfolding, his professional ground is literally shifting beneath his feet because the Broadway landscape had undergone a massive revolution.
A huge shift, yeah.
Porter came up in the era of the revue. He was the master of the loosely connected, star-driven vehicle where a brilliant standalone song didn't necessarily have to push the plot forward, you know. It just had to dazzle the audience.
But then Rodgers and Hammerstein drop Oklahoma in 1943, and everything changes. They usher in the era of the integrated musical.
Right.
Suddenly, the new gold standard demands that every single lyric, every chord progression, and every dance step must serve the narrative arc and the psychological development of the characters.
So the review structure is overnight rendered antique.
Precisely. Now, Porter had already fought this battle once, brilliantly, with Kiss Me Kate in 1948, proving he could integrate a score. But by 1955, the pressure to conform to the Rodgers and Hammerstein model was absolute. The industry was looking at him as an aging relic of the 1930s.
I want to push back on that a little, though.
Okay, sure.
Because Porter wasn't just some dinosaur refusing to evolve. He was arguably the most meticulous craftsman of his generation. From what I've seen in his archival letters, he didn't view the integrated musical as an insult. He viewed it as a puzzle.
Exactly. Give Me the Land functions as this manic ideological inventory, but it is crafted by a man clinging to his technical virtuosity as a literal lifeline against his physical pain and professional obsolescence.
And that desperation, that need to assert control, bleeds directly into the architecture of the song. Let's actually open up the hood and look at how he sets the stage here. The song begins with the verse, and Porter, ever the theatrical tactician, immediately deploys a brilliant bait and switch.
Oh, it's so good.
He starts by outlining an incredibly elite European itinerary. He says, I admit that France is big time, I admit that Spain is grand, and I had a swell week on a shaky but chic peak in Switzerland.
It is the ultimate geographic
A
flex.
shaky but chic peak. I mean, the internal rhyming there is just ridiculous.
So Porter.
And then he follows it up with, I adored the Ritz in London and the catacombs in Rome. So he is establishing the speaker as someone who possesses deep, intimate access to the cultivated elegance of the old world.
Which is, of course, the world Porter actually lived in. He is writing what he knows. He isn't just naming tourist traps. He is evoking the specific high society circuit of the interwar expatriate elite.
But then comes the pivot. The track door opens.
Yeah.
In the very next breath, after laying out this continent-spanning resume of luxury, the speaker declares, but I'm just an American hick, sick for home, sweet home.
Right.
Now, hold on. This is where the friction starts for me. Cole Porter, the man who practically invented urban, martini-soaked sophistication, calling himself an American hick, it feels like a massive put-on. Is he openly mocking his audience here? Is he playing a character to patronize the very people buying tickets to his show?
It is a delicate balance, but I wouldn't call it outright mockery. Porter's establishing a persona to generate ironic tension. You have to remember the context of the Cold War Broadway audience. They want to be told that America is the greatest nation on earth.
Right.
Porter gives them the patriot they want, but he wraps that patriot in an incredibly self-aware, ironic detachment.
He's winking at the stalls.
Heavily winking. The worldly sophisticate aggressively rejecting the catacombs of Rome to proudly declare himself a hick is a comedic setup. He is establishing this faux naive persona so he can deliver the punchline of the entire song, which is that the America this so-called hick is desperately longing for is not the majestic pastoral ideal. It isn't the amber waves of grain or the purple mountain majesties.
No, not at all. The America he wants is completely plastic. Which brings us crashing into refrain 1. The speaker has stated he wants to go home, so what specifically is he yearning for? He sings, give me the land of malted milk and honey.
It is a breathtaking lyrical subversion.
It really is.
He takes the absolute most sacred, ancient, resonant imagery available, the biblical promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, an image that implies divine providence and natural, unearned abundance, and he effortlessly degrades it into a diner order. The malted milkshake.
He drags the divine right down onto a sticky formica countertop. And the brilliance is that it works perfectly on 2 levels. Like, if you aren't paying attention, it just sounds like a folksy, sweet American image. But if you are listening closely, you realize he is pinpointing the exact mechanism of American capitalism, which is taking something pure and monetizing it.
Exactly.
He continues this thread immediately, asking for her little old soda fountains.
which is a highly specific cultural anchor for 1955. The drugstore soda fountain had evolved far beyond a place to buy a beverage. It was the architectural epicenter of the newly invented teenager.
Right, the teenager was a new concept then.
Completely. It was where youth culture gathered, where disposable income met burgeoning independence. It represents a very specific kind of manufactured, commercialized innocence.
And then we hit what might be the most revealing juxtaposition in the entire song. In refrain 2, he sings, "Give me the land of Lux and Listerine." Lux being the ubiquitous, heavily marketed brand of beauty soap, and Listerine being the aggressively dominant mouthwash.
This is where Porter's sociological audit really sharpens.
Think about the mechanics of this. He is defining the national character of the United States of America not by its constitution, not by its military victories, but by a breath mint and a bar of soap. He replaces the bald eagle with an advertising billboard.
Because he recognizes that in the post-war economic boom, the advertising industry was fundamentally re-engineering the American psyche. The transition from natural abundance to manufactured necessity was complete.
Yeah.
Think about the history of Listerine. They didn't just sell a product. They practically invented the modern anxiety of halitosis.
Oh, wow, right.
They took a minor natural human occurrence, bad breath, medicalized it with a scary-sounding Latinate word, and convinced an entire population that their social standing, their romantic prospects, their professional careers were in imminent danger unless they gargled with this specific amber liquid.
They manufactured the neurosis and then they sold the cure.
Exactly. And Porter's looking at this landscape and saying, this is who we are now. We are a nation defined by our heavily marketed insecurities and the branded products we buy to soothe them.
But notice the tone. He isn't writing a heavy-handed Marxist critique of consumerism. He's asking for it. He's saying, give me the land of Lux and Listerine. He is embracing the neurosis.
Yeah, yes.
He finds the sheer scale of American commercialism strangely comforting, almost deeply lovable in its absurdity.
It is a celebration of the artificial. Remember, he just rejected the authentic ancient history of the Roman catacombs. He prefers the bright, shiny, chemically synthesized promise of Listerine. It requires no heavy contemplation. It just requires a purchase.
And how he organizes this culture of consumption is where his technical genius as a list maker really takes over. As we move deeper into the song, he starts violently colliding different stratospheres of American culture. He creates these whiplash-inducing pairings that force you to reevaluate how you categorize art and entertainment.
The prime example being the line, "Give me the land of Bop and Bishop Sheen."
This pairing is a masterpiece of cultural whiplash. Let's look at the two elements. First, bop, bebop jazz. In 1955, we are talking about the music of Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk. This was not the polite, danceable swing music of the 1930s.
No, not at all.
Bebop was fast, it was aggressively intellectual, it was rhythmically complex, and it was deeply, inherently rebellious. It was the absolute bleeding edge of the counterculture.
It was music that demanded you pay attention. You couldn't just have it on in the background. It represented a breaking away from tradition, largely driven by black artists, reclaiming the narrative of jazz from the commercialized big bands.
And sharing the exact same breath, the exact same rhyming meter, is Bishop Sheen, Fulton J. Sheen, who was, at that moment, the most famous Catholic bishop in the world, largely because he had a massively popular primetime television show called Life is Worth Living.
And the format of that show is crucial to understand. It wasn't a fire and brimstone revival. Bishop Sheen would stand in a television studio wearing his full, magnificent religious vestments and simply speak to the camera, occasionally using a chalkboard.
Yeah.
He offered calm, erudite, incredibly reassuring moral instruction to millions of Americans every Tuesday night.
The man won an Emmy. I mean, he was going head-to-head in the ratings against Milton Berle and holding his own, so look at what Porter is doing. He takes the ultimate symbol of late-night, smoky, subversive, rhythmic anarchy bebop and places it right beside the ultimate symbol of primetime, brightly lit, traditional religious certainty.
And he does it without a hint of judgment. He doesn't position one as superior to the other.
Why, though? Because on the surface, bebop and Bishop Sheen are fundamentally at war with each other. One represents the tearing down of old structures. The other represents the absolute reinforcement of them.
Well, because Porter understood the profound psychological schizophrenia of 1950s America. The country was accelerating into the future at a terrifying speed technologically, economically, socially.
Right.
But the faster it moved, the more desperately the public clung to traditional stabilizing forces. They wanted the thrill of the new, but they demanded the comfort of the old. Porter recognizes that both of these extremes are completely necessary to sustain the American ecosystem. They are two sides of the exact same coin of national identity.
He pulls this trick again just a few lines later. He sings, "Give me the land of Ezio and Bing."
Ezio Pinza and Bing Crosby.
Right. Ezio Pinza was a legendary, incredibly respected Italian opera star. He was the heavyweight champion of high culture. Bing Crosby was the ultimate relaxed, pipe-smoking pop crooner, the voice of the everyman, high art and mass entertainment. And Porter just dumps them both into the exact same cultural blender.
And he even applies this leveling effect to the concept of American wealth. Listen to the pairing. Give me the land of dough and B.O. plenty.
Now, this one requires a bit of archaeology for a modern listener, but it is such a layered joke. Dough is obvious. It's slang for money, the cold, hard cash driving the post-war economic miracle. But B.O. Plenty is a highly specific aesthetic reference.
He was a character in the Dick Tracy comic strip.
Created by Chester Gould. And Gould was famous for these incredibly grotesque, aggressively ugly character designs. B.O. Plenty was this scruffy, unwashed, hillbilly-esque supporting character. His entire comedic premise was his complete lack of refinement and hygiene, hence the name B.O.
Exactly. So Porter takes dough, the aspiration of immense wealth, the capitalist dream, and smashes it right into a comic strip caricature of unwashed rural poverty.
It's a brilliant commentary on the nature of American abundance. He's suggesting that in the United States, wealth and vulgarity are completely inseparable. You can have all the dough in the world, but it doesn't buy you actual European refinement. It just buys you a louder version of B.O. Plenty.
What emerges from this entire section of the song is Porter's vision of the ultimate flat American democracy. There is no hierarchy here. It is not a pyramid where Ezio Pinza sits at the top and Dick Tracy comic strips sit at the bottom. Porter flattens the culture into a horizontal plane. Everything occupies the exact same amount of real estate in the American brain.
And because everything is equal, everything is equally ridiculous, which, brings up a massive logistical question. How is this even possible? How do all these wildly disparate things, a Catholic bishop, a jazz saxophonist, an opera singer, a comic strip character, a brand of mouthwash, how do they all reach the exact same people at the exact same time to create this unified horizontal culture?
You're touching on the exact technological shift that Porter identifies as the true engine of 1950s America, the absolute dominance of centralized mass media, the screen and the printing press.
He zeroes in on this in refrain 3. He sings, "Give me the land where people all love Lucy."
A direct invocation of I Love Lucy, starring Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
But we have to look at the scale of what I Love Lucy was in 1955. It wasn't just a hit show. It was a completely unprecedented cultural event. Desley Productions, by pioneering the multi-camera setup shot on 35mm film, created a product that could be broadcast flawlessly to tens of millions of people simultaneously. When Lucy went to the hospital to have a baby on the show, more people tuned in to watch that episode than watch the inauguration of President Eisenhower.
It was a centralized nervous system for the entire country.
And Porter immediately follows the Lucy reference with an even more meta-observation. Where time and life love Luce.
Henry Luce, the man who fundamentally engineered the American century.
Right. Henry Luce founded Time magazine, Life magazine, Fortune, Sports Illustrated. He controlled the photographic and journalistic reality for the American middle class. When Porter sings Time and Life Love Luce, it is this incredibly sharp, almost cynical joke about the self-referential loop of corporate media.
Exactly.
Luce's own magazines are constantly validating his own worldview. The media ecosystem is entirely closed and self-sustaining.
What Porter is mapping here is the death of regionalism and the birth of the American monoculture. Before this era, culture was fractured. You might have a beloved vaudeville act in New York, or a popular radio preacher in Chicago, or a specific musical style in New Orleans. But now, because of the sheer industrial force of television networks and national print syndicates, a comedian in Hollywood is instantly uniting 50 million people across a massive geographic expanse in real time.
We all consume the exact same images at the exact same moment. It's the 1950s equivalent of the internet algorithm, but instead of fracturing us into niches, it was forcing everyone into the exact same massive mainstream current.
And Porter proves this by launching into a relentless roll call of the high priests of this new monoculture, the national entertainers.
It's a staggering list. He asks for Jack Benny, the master of the deadpan pause and the frugal persona. He asks for Bob Hope, who essentially weaponized the wisecrack for the military-industrial complex through his USO tours. He asks for Fred Allen, the brilliant, biting radio satirist. And then he pulls off a rhyme that only Cole Porter would attempt. He rhymes Fred Allen with that little Kilgallen.
Dorothy Kilgallen. A fascinating inclusion.
She is the perfect emblem of this era. Kilgallen was a legitimate, hard-nosed journalist and crime reporter, but the vast majority of the country knew her because she sat on the panel of the television game show What's My Line every Sunday night. She represents the complete merger of news, gossip, and entertainment.
She was part of the National Greek Chorus. These people weren't just actors, they provided the vocabulary for the country. If Jack Benny made a joke on Sunday night, millions of people were repeating that exact same joke by the water cooler on Monday morning.
And Porter caps off this entire media section by asking for lovely Billy Rose. Now, Billy Rose was a wildly successful, incredibly flamboyant Broadway producer and lyricist. He was famous for outsized, extravagant, financially massive spectacles. He produced the Aquacade.
Yes.
He was the very embodiment of show business as a ruthless commercial enterprise.
By including Billy Rose, Porter is inserting a very deliberate insider wink. He is acknowledging his own complicity in this system. He is saying, look, I know that all of this, the comedians, the magazines, the hit songs, including the one you are listening to right now, is a manufactured product. It is all being packaged and sold by guys like Billy Rose.
It prevents the song from becoming blindly patriotic. Porter is deeply aware of the artificial machinery operating behind the curtain, but importantly, he knows that if the song remains purely about abstract media theory and corporate publishing, it loses its emotional resonance. He has to anchor these massive sociological concepts in tangible sensory realities. He has to make the listener actually taste the country.
Which is why he pivots to constructing a highly specific, totally democratic culinary map of America.
He asks for chili burgers juicy and frozen orange juice.
I want to pause on frozen orange juice because it is such a deceptively profound lyric for 1955. Today, we think of it as a cheap, slightly sad breakfast staple. But in the mid-50s, frozen concentrated orange juice was a symbol of absolute, triumphant American scientific progress.
The technology literally came out of World War II. The high vacuum evaporation process used to mass-produce penicillin for the troops was adapted by the National Research Corporation to dehydrate orange juice, leading to the creation of Minute Maid.
Exactly. It represents the conquest of nature by industry. You no longer have to rely on the seasons, or live near a citrus grove, or manually squeeze the fruit. You simply go to your gleaming new supermarket, buy a perfectly uniform frozen cylinder of science, add tap water, and you have conquered breakfast. It is convenience elevated to a patriotic virtue.
And he contrasts that hyper-modern convenience with deeply regional, almost ancient culinary traditions. He mentions the clam bake, the fish ball, and the chowder.
A very tight cluster of New England imagery. The clam bake evokes a rustic, communal, almost indigenous connection to the land and the sea, cooking seafood over hot stones on the beach.
But then, right in the middle of this culinary tour, he throws in a dish that completely shifts the psychological tone. He says, "Give me the land of chicken a la king."
It is the single most revealing food item on the entire list.
Let's dissect chicken a la king. Because to a modern ear, it sounds incredibly dated, slightly heavy, and almost comically pretentious. It is essentially just diced chicken and mushrooms in a creamy sherry sauce served over a piece of toast or a puff pastry. Why does Cole Porter, a man who regularly dined at the finest restaurants in Paris, highlight this specific dish as a pillar of American greatness? Is he just making fun of the American palate?
He is observing something much deeper than taste. He is observing aspiration. Chicken a la king perfectly captures a very specific American culinary neurosis. It is, at its core, a simple, heavy, utilitarian comfort food. But it has been dressed up with this vaguely European, aristocratic, completely fabricated title a la king.
It's a peasant dish in a tuxedo.
Precisely. It is the culinary equivalent of the B.O. plenty and dough dynamic. It represents the middle-class attempt to elevate the ordinary through borrowed faux sophistication. It was the absolute staple of mid-tier banquets, country club luncheons, and wedding receptions in the 1950s. It was what you served when you wanted to signal that you'd arrived socially, even if the food itself was thoroughly unexceptional.
We want the rich comfort of the cream sauce, but we desperately want the prestige of feeling like royalty while we eat it. Porter sees right through it, and he loves it, and he maps this same faux sophistication geographically and architecturally. He rapid-fires the cities: Chicago, El Paso, Savannah.
An industrial powerhouse, a rough border town, and a bastion of decaying Southern gentility. He is reminding the audience of the vast contradictory space the country occupies.
And then, perfectly encapsulating that desire for gentility, he delivers my absolute favorite euphemism in the entire song. Amidst the clam bakes and the chili burgers, he asks for my little old room called Powder, the powder room.
The polite, mid-century euphemism for the restroom.
It is brilliant. It reflects a society that is so obsessed with maintaining a veneer of refinement, so terrified of its own biological reality, that it invents delicate, aristocratic language to mask the most basic human functions. We don't go to the toilet to relieve ourselves, we go to the powder room to refresh our makeup. It is the architectural manifestation of chicken a la king.
He is mapping the psychological repressions of the country right alongside its diet and its geography.
But the absolute zenith of this song, the final sequence of our lyrical dissection, is where Porter abandons the polite euphemisms entirely, throws the rulebook out the window, and fully embraces the objectively absurd. He starts heavily seeding his list of things I love about America with things that are undeniably aggressively negative.
This is where the satire achieves its maximum bite. In refrain 3, he ends the stanza by joyfully declaring, "Give me acidity, give me the USA."
Acidity. He is begging for gastric distress, and in refrain 4, he escalates it, begging for delinquency. And back in refrain 2, it was the relentless grind of publicity. He anchors the sweeping climaxes of the song not on concepts of liberty or justice, but on the most irritating, abrasive aspects of modern existence.
And look at the environmental setup he builds leading into delinquency. He sings, "Give me the land where rooms are overheated. Give me the land where influenza grows."
Okay, stop and think about the audacity of this. You have been hired to write an anthem about how superior your country is to the grim austerity of the Soviet bloc. And your argument for American superiority relies on bragging about the flu, indigestion, juvenile delinquents, and stiflingly hot radiators. It completely defies the logic of a patriotic anthem. If you take it literally, it sounds like he hates the place.
But you can't take it literally. When you view it through Porter's deeply ironic lens, it synthesizes the entire philosophical core of the song. America is lovable precisely because of its loud, messy, chaotic imperfections.
The imperfections are the proof of life.
Exactly. In a land of such overwhelming manufactured plenty, where we are drowning in malted milk and frozen orange juice and continuous television broadcasts, even our discomforts become shared cultural touchstones. We all get heartburn from the chili burgers. We all complain about the overheated apartments.
It is the great equalizer. The rich man and the poor man both catch the flu.
Porter is making a profound argument about the nature of patriotism. He is rejecting the idea that loving your country requires you to claim as flawless. Blind, uncritical devotion is boring to a man like Porter. True affection, the kind of deep, resonant love that actually lasts, is rooted in a profound, ironic appreciation for our shared dysfunction. He is saying, yes, our rooms are boiling, our kids are out of control, and our stomachs are churning with acidity, but it is our acidity.
It's the difference between admiring a pristine, cold marble statue in a museum and loving a messy, loud, deeply flawed family living in your house. And he proves just how far he is willing to push this embrace of the messy reality with a line that still feels shockingly bold for 1955. He sings, "Give me Savannah and some little more marijuana."
It is a genuinely startling lyric to encounter in a mainstream Broadway script from the mid-50s.
It is wild. The context here is vital. The Marijuana Tax Act was passed in 1937, effectively beginning the era of federal criminalization. By 1955, the reefer madness panic had successfully calcified marijuana as a dangerous, corrupting vice in the minds of the white, middle-class mainstream. It was deeply associated with the jazz underground, the counterculture, and racial minorities. Yet Porter tosses it into his list with the exact same breezy, affectionate tone he uses for a clam bake or a bar of Lux soap.
It is his ultimate wink to the insiders in the audience. Porter, as a lifelong fixture of cosmopolitan nightlife and the bohemian underground, was intimately aware of the realities of the culture, well beyond the sanitized suburban ideal. By including marijuana, he is telling the audience, I see the whole picture. I see the shadows as well as the brightly lit drugstore counters.
And as if to immediately diffuse the tension of that controversial inclusion, he follows it up with a masterclass in comic deflation. In refrain 5, he evokes what appears to be a completely sincere, beautiful, pastoral image. He sings, "Give me her forests, soothing and silent, where robins nestle."
You hear that build-up and you think, finally, he is delivering the traditional, earnest, patriotic nature poetry we've been waiting for.
But Porter refuses to let the earnestness stand. He finishes the thought by revealing why he wants to go to those soothing, silent forests, far from little old Georgie Jessel.
The ultimate deflating punchline.
For those who don't know, Georgie Jessel was an incredibly famous comedian, actor, and ubiquitous public speaker. He held the unofficial title of Toastmaster General of the United States. He was the guy who emceed every major political banquet, every celebrity roast, every massive charity dinner. He was loud, he's sentimental, he was constantly talking, and he represented the absolute zenith of old school, aggressive, backslapping show business charm.
So Porter constructs this majestic image of pristine American wilderness, and the primary driving motivation for him to visit it is simply to escape the sound of a very loud comedian.
It is a brilliant, comic intrusion into the sacred landscape. It perfectly encapsulates his entire relationship with the country. He loves America deeply, but he is constantly, desperately seeking refuge from its overwhelming commercialized noise.
And that tension is what elevates Gimme the Land from a simple list of rhymes into a masterpiece of cultural observation. When you step back and look at the entire sweep of the song, from the European high society of the verse to the malted milk, the Listerine, the jazz, the bishops, the indigestion, and the marijuana, you see the undeniable genius of Cole Porter as a chronicler of the American century.
This song might never have achieved the sweeping romantic immortality of Night and Day, and it might have been unceremoniously cut from Silk Stockings before the show even found its final form, but as a historical document, it is an absolute treasure.
It stands as a vibrant, incredibly durable testament to his ability to capture the exact rhythm, the baffling contradictions, and the peculiar manic feeling of mid-century America. He didn't just preserve the physical artifacts of an era, he preserved its psychological state, its anxieties, its aspirations, and its quietly affectionate self-awareness.
He proved that the true history of a culture isn't just found in its treaties or its wars, it is found in the little things. It's found in the comic strips, the soap brands, the frozen juice, and the euphemisms we use for the toilet. And so, as we wrap up this exhaustive exploration of Porter's 1955 America, I want to turn the lens back onto you, the listener. Think about the massive, sprawling list that you construct in your own life every single day, whether you realize it or not. If you had to sit down and write a verse about your own homesickness right now, what would it actually look like? What are the specific brands, the fleeting viral celebrities, the manufactured everyday comforts that define the borders of your world today?
It is a genuinely difficult exercise if you try to be as honest as Porter was. What are the modern equivalents of Lux soap and Listerine? Mouthwash, the products that both invent our insecurities and promise to cure them. Who are the figures we will place side by side to capture our current cultural whiplash?
And that leads to a much darker, much more provocative question to leave you with. When Porter wrote Give Me the Land, he was relying on the fact that an audience of 1,000 strangers sitting in a Broadway theater would all recognize Bishop Sheen, B.O. Plenty, and Georgie Jessel. They shared a monoculture. But today, our culture is entirely dictated by hyper-personalized internet algorithms. We don't all watch the same shows, we don't read the same columnists. Our realities are fractured into millions of individualized feeds. So the question isn't just what would be on a modern list song. The question is, in an algorithm-driven world where we no longer share the same cultural references, is it even possible to write a song about a unified American experience ever again? Or did Cole Porter capture the exact moment right before the shared American landscape fractured forever? Something to think about the next time you scroll through your feed. We will see you next time on Porter-Pedia.